Well, I am going to very briefly tell you a little about some of the practical ways in which we can actually move forward. As some of you know, my work, and especially my book, The Real Wealth of Nations, presents a new economic model, very much in line with what both Hazel and Tim have been talking about, a caring economics of partnerism. Now, why? Why is this so important, and why is the first step really changing the conversation? Because too many people are still stuck in this argument about capitalism versus socialism. And I think we need to change the conversation to really talk about what we have to build in order to move forward. Both capitalism and socialism came out of the 1700s and 1800s, early industrial times, and we are now in the post-industrial 21st century. But even beyond that, and this takes me right to my research, both capitalism and socialism came out of times that, while they both challenged what I call an economics of domination, a top-down economics, Smith challenged mercantilism, then Marx came along and challenged the bourgeoisie and capitalism. They also perpetuated some very core problems that are now manifesting themselves in the lack of resilience that Hazel spoke about of our economic systems, namely the both relegated to, quote, just reproductive work rather than, quote, productive work, the work of caring for people starting at birth and caring for our natural life support systems. There is nothing in either capitalism or socialism about caring for nature. For both, nature was there to be exploited. As for the work of caring for people, in people's health, people's children, for them, that was to be performed for free. This is where we get to Hazel's love economy, for free by a woman in a male-controlled household. As late as when Marx wrote, in most places, a woman who could not sue for injuries negligently inflicted on her, she could not even sue for those. Only her husband could for loss of her services. So once we understand this, we know that what we are really dealing with is the devaluation, what I call this gendered system of values, which takes me to the second step that we have to take. Why do we really think of economics as something separate? Economics doesn't just spring out of nowhere. Economics are embedded in a larger social system. And we have to understand that. And we have to understand that GDP, for example, which is a crazy measure, where externalities are everything important, right? I mean, it boggles the imagination, really, how we have such a flawed measure of so-called economic health. It doesn't, but it follows the premises of both socialism and capitalism, that not only to include activities that actually harm and even take life, like making cigarettes, and the resulting medical bills, funeral costs are all great for GDP, it goes up, but it fails to include as, quote, productive work, the work that is carried on in the unpaid economy, largely still by women, of caring for people. So we have to show the economic value, yes, of caring for people and caring for nature. And this takes me to the third thing, and that really I'm going very quickly here, but what we're talking about really is a top-down domination economics, whether it was a Chinese emperor or a feudal lord or an Indian pasha or an Arab sheikh, it doesn't really matter, or whether it's so-called trickle-down economics, which is really going back to the feudal idea that those on bottom should content themselves with the scraps falling from the opulent tables of those on top. We're talking about domination economics, and they are embedded in this faulty paradigm that we have all been taught is the only possibility. And I won't go into much of that, except to say that we really have to show that actually this work of caring for people starting at birth is essential, especially in our post-industrial knowledge information era, when even economists who are living in a separate reality somewhere tell us that the most important capital is what they call high-quality human capital. Well, we don't get these resilient, creative people who can work in teams rather than just taking or giving orders without taking into account neuroscience. What it shows is that whether or not we have this high-quality human capital largely hinges on this so-called women's work of caring for people starting at birth, the first 5 years. My new book that just came out a couple of years ago with Oxford University Press, Nurturing Our Humanity, has a great deal of that information from neuroscience. And I urge you, I mean, the book that I'm best known for, of course, which is now in 56 US printings and umpteen foreign editions, is The Chalice and the Blade, which contradicts, which is another thing that we have to do, change the story. Change the story, because we humans live by story, and we have been told that human nature is bad, whether it's selfish genes or whether it's original sin. It's the same story. We're bad, we have to be controlled from the top. But the fourth thing that we have to do is new metrics. And Hazel, of course, has been very much a leader in this area. We at the Center for Partnership Systems, and I'll give you a URL in a moment, have been developing what we call social wealth economic indicators that show the economic, not only the human value and the environmental value, but the pure economic value of caring for people starting at birth and caring for our natural life support systems, because the costs of not caring are horrendous if we really have adequate measures. So what I'm really asking you to do is to get out of your comfort zones and really think in different ways. Because as Einstein said, we cannot solve problems with the same thinking that created them. So I invite you to think of the future, of how, our domination systems, domination economics create artificial scarcities, not only by misdistribution to the top, by misdistribution into warfare and weapons, but by failing to invest in caring for people starting at birth. So really, this is a whole new way of looking, and it's embedded in what I call a partnership. I've introduced a domination partnership biocultural scale, showing, for one thing, that contrary to these stories, I'm being very nonlinear now because I want to get in a lot of information, contrary to the stories that we've been told, warfare is only at most 5,000 to 10,000 years old. This is what the archaeology actually shows. And for millennia, we lived more in societies that oriented more to the more egalitarian, more sustainable, more gender balance. And this is not a matter of women against men or men against women. It's a matter of valuing the human and the life support that is at the basis of all of our existences. So if you want to find out about the social wealth economic indicators, about the social wealth index, please go to centerforpartnership.org. If you want to find out more about me, go to that website, but also go to rianeeisler.com. We humans really now stand at the threshold of a new era. And unless we think differently, unless we change the social categories, linguistic psychologists have long told us that the categories provided by our language challenge our thinking. Get rid of right, left, religious, secular, Eastern, Western, Northern, Southern, capitalist, socialist. Start thinking of this domination to partnership configuration that we have to build. And we are building it against enormous resistance and yes, periodic regressions, but the movement is there. So I'm going to stop now because I don't want to take any more of your time. But I want to say that once we have a real sense of these four cornerstones that we have to address that are introduced in my work and certainly in nurturing our humanity, childhood, gender, because we do have a hidden system of gendered values in which not only women we've inherited, but anything stereotypically considered feminine is devalued. And economics is the third cornerstone, but not capitalism versus socialism, etc., but moving to a new caring economics of partnerism. And fourth, story and language. We have to think in terms of these two configurations. And yes, childhood and gender have to be part of our understanding of human society, because women and children are the majority of humanity, and they are left out of both socialist, capitalist, left, right, etc., all of the ways we've been taught to think has marginalized nothing less than the majority of humanity. So I think that working together, we can build these four foundations for a more equitable and sustainable future.